The past year has been challenging for us all in many diverse ways and has affected each one of us differently. The pandemic highlighted existing inequalities, such as financial security, access to health and wellbeing services, racism and domestic loading, amongst other social, cultural and political issues, which got me thinking about whether or not we truly have the freedom to choose, or say the equality of choice, to be able to challenge and change our circumstances. So personally, I don't measure my freedom by the breadth of the options available to me, but in how well I am equipped to choose between those options. So I'd like to start by asking each one of you, what is your definition of choice, and how have you succeeded in your career in making the right choices? Anyone first? I'll have to start pointing.
I better start. Sorry, can you hear me? Okay. Thanks very much, Candice, and thanks everybody for coming here today as well, and also thanks to all organisations that are supporting this really important initiative to increase gender diversity in engineering. In terms of choice, I guess I closely relate them to options, and maybe you need quality choices. It's true, it's no good to have choices that don't give you options. My plug for the day is probably about mining engineering. So, as you heard, I'm a mining engineer. And for all of those who haven't yet made your career choice, mining engineering does give you good options and great choices. And why is that? Well, it's because it's in demand. And so that's a quality choice to have made, and I'd like to think that was it. I probably didn't know it actually at the time, but I'm giving those in the room that haven't made the choice yet the opportunity to hear that it is a good choice. I guess also as you go through your career, and certainly early in your career, trying to invest in creating future options is important, because then you can actually make choice. And without that, at times like the pandemic, you're going to have limited opportunities. And just even thinking about what future choices you might have is quite empowering, particularly early in your career. You're thinking about, well, would I like to do consulting one day? What would I need to do to prepare myself for that? Would I like to be on boards or in leadership roles? What could I do to prepare myself for that? How can I invest in myself through volunteering? Or through education and personal development to give myself choices.
Yeah. Mark, anything to add?
Yeah, sure. So at that personal level, I think choice, you need to understand where you want to be going in your career and what you aspire to, and then build information and awareness to enable you to achieve that. So put the building blocks in place to be able to achieve where you want to go. Coming to whether it's participating on boards, getting a mentor. Having a mentor can be a wonderfully positive and independent way to help test your ideas outside of the confines of wherever you're working and the supervisor structure that you might be working on. And so when you build those components of your career and understand where you want to be going to, you've actually got a bit of a path to where you want to go to. But I'd also say, if you're doing that, don't be blind to other opportunities. Vicky and I were just talking about how she evolved into her role, and Vicky mentioned that she didn't anticipate being an academic when she started her career, but look at where she is now.
I'd probably add to that. So my career has gone from being a chemical engineer to working a little taste in finance, then working in the oil and gas industry, and then now working in power. So I guess, if anything, I've had an overwhelming number of choices. And for me, that's really difficult. There's a philosopher, Ruth Chang, that talks about when there are hard choices, we can actually move away from trying to make the right decision to actually advocate for who do you want to be. So I guess when you're trying to work out in your career, if you're not entirely sure, that's fine. That's so absolutely normal. But it is a time and place for you to consider who is it that you want to be and what taps into your value system. So When I struggle to make choices, and that's something I find all the time, I always tap into, okay, well, what's my values? Who do I want to be? And for me, there is no right decision in your career. It's about who do you want to be.
And as a leading industry change maker, Naureen, you've had to make challenging decisions or voice a thought that goes against the norm. Have you ever doubted or felt nervous in making that choice or challenge?
Yes, absolutely. So if you're making change, you will be riddled with self-doubt. It'll be extremely hard. It requires so much resilience and mental energy, and that doesn't change, right? If you're trying to make, excuse the pun, but it doesn't. If you're trying to change something, it's going to be hard. And so the two things that I would say, because you are going to face that, is first. Change isn't easy. So if things don't go your way or as you expect, don't kick yourself while you're down. So don't let that self-critical, the change hasn't gone how I expected. I must be terrible. I'm doing something wrong. You need to put that aside. You need to really learn to, change is hard. It's not always your fault if it doesn't go your way. The second thing I'd say is, as you're going through changes and trying to implement them, you want to have the right support in your corner. And so, this can be your boss, it can be your mentor, it can be your friends, but don't be afraid to reach out to, new people. Perhaps you want someone's experience that you haven't met before, and if you need that, reach out and find that. And you'll be surprised if you reach out for help. There's a lot of people out there that if you say, hey, I'm trying to do this new thing, I'm really outside my comfort bubble, do you mind if I take you out for coffee and get your ideas and, can I leverage or can I learn from your experience? So they're the two things I'd really say, self-doubt's very common, don't kick yourself when you're down, and also just make sure you've got the right people in your corner and that you're fully supported.
Yeah. And Mark, do you have any tips to share in terms of overcoming this sort of self-doubt or the nervousness that you might get in making any sort of hard choices?
Sure. It's for me, having a firm personal set of values is really important, and understanding what's important to me. I'm really fortunate that the company I work with, I have very strong alignment of values with our company's values. And so in my work environment, making tough decisions is a lot easier because I know that the organisation's got my back. And so working with an organisation that has good alignment is really important to me. The other side is having a good understanding of the bigger picture and how you're going about to make a decision, the strategic framework on which you might make a call, and that's probably the engineer in me. But having some structure around what's important in the decision, and then making sure that you're engaging and taking people on the journey through the decision that you're making.
Yeah, and you mentioned before building blocks, making sure that you've got some building blocks in terms of building some options in the future. What would you say are some good building blocks for people to start thinking about if they're thinking about building their options in their career?
Sure. So, and I'll do a plug for Constructionarium here.
Construction versus mining.
So have a look. We're working with UQ on Constructionarium, but if there's any young professionals, either undergraduate or postgraduate, that are interested in an incredible 7-day immersive experience in designing, planning and building stuff, please get in contact or have a look on the website. We've got a course starting this week. It's wonderful. I'd actually talk to a variety of experiences is quite important. And one of the things that we learn at Constructionarium is we've got a range of people that come from the design field, come from clients, they come from constructors. And they all bring a different perspective. But coming in, working as a group, these different perspectives and this diversity of thought is actually incredibly powerful. And so having a range of experiences as part of your career can be incredibly powerful because it'll help broaden your perspective as you move on in your career.
Yeah. Jory, when it comes to self-doubt, you've got a really interesting story to share. What are you pretending not to know about?
Yes. So, from a cultural perspective, so I think, in the role that I have, and I've been really working on the mine in Mongolia for 10 years now, It's a challenge on a number of fronts when you're coming to sort of confronting your own biases, because working across significant cultural differences and thinking about how you can be aware of those cultural differences. Things like we do have construction discussions about productivity differences and things like that across countries. And some of those discussions, there is that voice in your head saying, where is the line here on this? And how can we make sure that we're really talking about building up and developing capability and recognising it and promoting it as it emerges? Because otherwise, I guess you only have to think back at the history of Australia and colonialism to look at how, and that might be a bit dramatic, I guess, but if you're thinking about the corporate world, you are going into some of these countries and developing capability from in a particular industry. There may not be a lot of capability, and so instead of ignoring that or trying not to talk about it, I think to me the most constructive thing to do is actually to acknowledge it and to make sure that your intentions are clear with your team so that people understand that whenever that comes up, it's more about the positive impacts of diversity of culture, and people are clear that you respect that, you want to have that, and it's a positive contributor. Because otherwise, you can end up just not using words. I think, anyway. There's some words I just think, oh no, that's uncomfortable. So I've really tried to challenge myself on that, and the first step is acknowledging your own bias, but then also challenging when you see things come up, is it right to talk about this like this? How can we look at this in the right way? How can we honour what we're doing and culturally what's happening in country? There's some amazing work being done, but we need to make sure that we're also being fair, promoting people who are developing capability, talking in generalities that are useful and not being the colonists, I guess, and really just keeping in mind that balance.
Yep. And when it comes to everyday lived experience of these sorts of inequalities, I think of systemic bias and institutionalised oppression. And this occurs when established laws, customs and practices systematically reflect and produce inequalities based on one's membership in targeted social groups. Mark or Naureen, can you share with us what's the hardest choice you've faced in the past with regards to systemic bias, and how did you work through that?
All right.
You go first.
I think the hardest choices I've had to make in that kind of context is, if you are working in a place where there are systemic issues, do you stay or do you go? Do you choose to be resilient? Or do you choose to say, I'm worth more than this? Because don't forget, as female engineers, you are very, very in demand. And I think a lot of female engineers that I meet underestimate how important they are to the industry. And so when making those choices, it's around, I guess, do I think, what is it going to take to change this environment? What's the likelihood that this environment will change? Like, is this a bottom, is it a local team issue? Is it, coming from upper management? And also, what are the, the driving forces for change? Will there be a turnover of CEO soon? Do you think the senior team will change? Do you think it's a particular person that's creating this toxic culture, and do you think that person's going to move? And then sometimes it's about your mental health and looking after yourself. I mean, if you're coming to work and you find that your self-confidence is deteriorating, maybe it's just time to go. And so I think for me, that's been one of the hardest challenges, is being able to understand or think about, do I stay or do I go?
Yeah. Yep. Mark, anything to add?
Yeah, I'd say it comes back to values, aligned to what Naureen's saying, that understanding your values and how you want to behave according to those values, and then perhaps extending that into the place that you're at, whether it's a safe place to be able to make a decision or continue in, and whether there's awareness for change or empowerment for change to occur. Because if you can't see things changing and there's this misalignment, then something else might need to change.
Yeah, that's very interesting around thinking about, I guess, the institutionalised systems, thinking about whether we choose to challenge a system or just say, no, I don't have the energy to be able to take on that challenge. Jo, you've got an interesting observation on mistaken compassion. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, and I think this sort of relates to some of the previous answers as well, or comments, is that, during my career, I haven't really worked part-time. I've always worked full-time. That's been a choice because I felt that at the time I had the opportunity with younger children to do that. It really affected, my perception is, there was a chance it would really affect my career to be working part-time, seen as less serious. And I think now there's a lot better opportunities for that. And in fact, in a previous role in Rio Tinto, I saw somebody be promoted to a general manager role while they were expecting, which to me is amazing to see that awareness of, our lives and our careers are long. And those times when, whether it's a man or a woman, would like to not work full time are short. And we will help maintain great people in our industries if we give people that breathing space and don't force them to make a change, which may see them exit the industry eventually. So I think, however, once you become a manager and you're leading people, certainly for me, I'm pretty compassionate about the idea that life is crazy when you have young families and carer responsibilities. And, I feel quite compassionate towards people. And I know when people were compassionate towards me, I paid them back in terms of good work, working outside, regular hours, no issues. I want to support you. You've supported me. However, I can catch myself being overly compassionate in terms of expecting people to make a particular decision. If somebody wants to make a decision about working part-time or what have you, I think we need to give them the space to do it, or a promotion even at a time like that. We have to be prepared to say, this is your choice, my overlay doesn't apply to you. I think you're capable, we'd like to promote you, or whatever it is, or move you. Or, because I guess we think about, we're in mobile industries, we might be thinking, oh, that person, it doesn't suit them to move at the moment. And you shouldn't be thinking about, making those choices for people. We have to give people their own choices.
Yeah. I really like your point about not managing options for other people. And in terms of that, it can be quite a difficult decision for a woman in engineering when it comes time to starting a family and the options available to them. I think that's something that we all have faced or will face coming up. I guess in terms of thinking about choosing your battles, we've all heard that saying, you've got to choose your battles wisely.
Yeah.
So what would you say in terms of within your experience in your career where you've had to choose a battle and you've said, yep, that's a battle I need to fight and that's a battle I need to win?
Oh, yep. Okay, absolutely. For me, choosing your battle is really important. And the reason is, we don't have unlimited amounts of energy. And I think I was explaining earlier, change is really hard and it just takes so much out of you. So you really want to prioritise, what's really important to me, but also what am I going to be able to influence and impact. So something for me in my career, in terms of picking my battles. So a couple of years ago, or actually a little while ago now, so I was in an accident. I actually smashed one of my vertebrae, and I had, titanium rods up and down the spine, screws through the spine. I hope you've all finished breakfast. I was so stiff. I was actually literally put back together, and I was so stiff that I couldn't actually sit down properly for months. And I remember, for me, going back to work was really important because for me that was a step towards feeling normal again. And when I got to work, it was because of policy at that time. I couldn't get a standing desk because the accident hadn't happened at work. And I remember working on a bookshelf because I was just like, no, I really need to be here. I just, not because I wanted to work, although I had a really exciting project at the time. For me, it was, you know, if I'm at work and I'm trying, this means that I'm like on my way to recovery. So for me, that was super important. Now, eventually I did get the desk and the support I needed, but when you go through like a traumatic sort of accident like that, the last thing you need to be doing is fighting to get you know, a desk so you can come to work. And so for me, that was, I couldn't handle the idea of someone else going through that. And so for me, it was about changing that corporate policy so that no one else had to go through that. And I actually reached out to the C-suite and explained, you know, these are the issues, this is a solution you can take. And I remember thinking at the time, oh my God, who am I? Who am I to be, you know, I'm not in health and safety, I'm not in legal, I'm not in procurement, I'm not in any of these teams. And I was really worried about making these career-limiting moves, you know, jumping over people. And I had the best intention, right? So for me, I was terrified at the time, but I knew that no one else could go through that. Yeah, so super important.
And maybe just a different spin on that, Candice, is personally I've been trying to allow more battles to occur amongst my team, more discussions, because it's representing more diversity of conversation. I've actually found, and we've found as a team, having conversations where there are different viewpoints coming in has led to much richer discussions, and we're coming up with much better decisions. So it was interesting when you posed the question to us around battles. Absolutely agree around it can be exhausting, but at the same time it can be actually quite empowering as well.
Yeah. And how would you say you foster this sort of challenge mindset within your teams?
So it's been really important to make it safe for people to be able to have those conversations, to empower people, and to make sure that they're respected and they're heard if they've got a different view. Whether that's someone coming in and having a chat in my workspace, whether it's raising something in a meeting, whether it's suggesting something through a different means. Creating that environment where diversity of thought, where challenge is accepted, has been quite positive, I think, for our team.
Oh, that's good to hear.
And you need to accept failure as an option. You know, I think you can see, if you work in a big company, I think you can see certain areas where failure is not accepted and blame is the culture, and it affects every interaction with every person in that part of the organisation. And I used to think, what's going on? Like, why are these people so hard to get on with? And then you realise, because they're terrified all the time, you know. And so I guess to get the best out of people, allowing some failure and accepting that, you know, the path you think you should take to get to an outcome, it's not always that one. You've got to accept a bit of failure. And if you're making change takes time. You know, you just can't, you know, I've had a project that was a resequencing of a mine that had 500 million in value associated with it, and I thought, this is like going to sell itself, this idea. No, you know, you've got to go back 3-4 times, bring people along. So it doesn't matter how good your idea is, you've got to help make that change, and accept you need resilience to do so, as well as a bit of help from good culture.
Yeah. And I think those are really, really good tips around challenging yourself, challenging others. And now all three of you hold quite senior positions, and you have to lead people and lead these types of changes. How do you think good leaders should behave? And how do you think your actions have helped foster that sort of environment where you can lead those changes, and not just you driving those changes, but your teams taking that effort upon themselves as well? In any order.
I mean, I don't think you can micromanage. I mean, as engineers, you know, we're pretty good at getting into the detail, and it can be hard to step out, you know, and give people ownership. But if you don't do that, then you get pretty busy quickly. So that's pretty important to make sure that you're not doing. So, you know, and I think thinking about your legacy as a leader is really important. You know, whenever I come into a new team, the first thing I do is check pay parity, and if I identify an issue, I won't let it go, because how do I know the person following me is going to have that same care for equality within a team? And so, I've had a situation where I actually it took more than a year and a restructure of a team to fix, and a promotion to fix what could have been fixed with a one-off adjustment. But I just couldn't make that happen, and I couldn't leave the situation. So I think as a leader, you just have to be, to me, you've got to leave the team in a good position. So, you have to work on those things, and it comes back to your values.
So for me, I've been working really hard on authenticity and being genuine as a leader. So I've, in a lot of ways, had to remove the mask that I used to have in the workplace as a leader, the confident, strong, and that's actually been quite powerful and enabling. And so I've had much better conversations with the people in my team because they're seeing more of the real me.
I think for me, that serving leadership style is really important. So you being there for the best interests in your team, I think both of you alluded to that, is very key. And I think and Mark's alluded to this as well, creating that psychological safety for your team, like being able to express, I don't know something, but I can learn. So quite often in team meetings or, with the team, I'll talk about things like imposter syndrome or, self-doubt, and that becomes normal. It's okay to talk about those things, not just because it's the topic of the month and there's half an hour allotted to it because HR told you so. But by sharing that, you're able to get to know the team, they can talk about it more freely, and then you can help them, right? So it's your job to take something impossible, like a challenge for them, and then break it down into what's possible. So, for example, someone in my team, technically brilliant, terrified of presentations. In fact, said to me, I don't want to do your job because I'm so scared of presenting. And so, which is crazy, this person absolutely can do it. So for me, it was getting to know them a little bit and having those conversations around, okay, what's so terrifying about this? And it was actually the fact they were terrified of managers. Happy to go toe-to-toe with technical engineers, but something about managers just didn't do it for them. So that was the impossible. So the possible steps we worked through was, okay, well, let's do some presentations with slightly senior people, and let's keep building it up. And so eventually, that person did actually present to the EGM, bunch of general managers, and absolutely killed it. So your job to get to know the person, create that psychologically safe environment so you get to know them and they get to know you, and break down that impossible into those possible chunks for them.
So it sounds like there's a lot of mentoring that needs to go in and sort of plays a part going hand in hand in terms of leading changes and making changes easier for people. We've got about 5 minutes left, so I thought it'd be great to wrap up just with some final tips. How do we as an industry make the hard choices to take on these types of challenges of stepping up, taking action and leading diversity change?
I'll put a couple in. I think that can be approached at different levels. So I think at the industry level, participation in industry groups can get a lot of change done where it harnesses multiple organisations together. I think clients have much more influence than what they understand. You look at Sydney City Council having a discussion at the moment around mandating architecture teams having a minimum of 40% females and 40% males in any of the teams that are being presented to work on their projects. So clients through procurement strategies and what they're asking for of industry can make a huge difference. And then the last thing I'd say at the individual level is getting involved. So organisations like this in your industry associations within your organisation to enable change.
To me, it's getting gender diversity to happen across the industry starts at school, actually. And, I'm involved with the school that my children went to try and promote science and technical careers, engineering careers there, because we need a big pool and to choose from, and that's where Women in Engineering, is a super important program to get more gender diversity into engineering. But then once people are in careers, I think we do a pretty good job actually of early careers now. But, as we go through into senior leadership, there's less transparency around recruitment and opportunities for roles. And so, I think at middle management, we're not doing a bad job either there because, for example, if I recruit, there has to be at least one woman in the pool, and geez, wouldn't it be nice if it was 50-50? But let's say you can sometimes only find one woman in the pool, but it doesn't matter. It's super important. Recently I was involved in recruiting a principal for a major public high school in Brisbane. And do you know that if I hadn't asked the question about having women in the pool to be considered, there wouldn't have been a woman interviewed for that role. Now, that's mind-blowing because look at how many women are teachers and senior teachers. And so I think it's incumbent upon all of us, when we're involved in any of those decisions, ask the question. Try to help other people take on that as, hey, that was a good experience. I saw something different in that person compared to what I thought. Next time we'll make sure we do include the pool, make sure the pool of candidates is diverse. So to me, that is something that we're still not quite there with. And maybe there's something about transparency there. I think in big organisations, it's very tempting to be kind of, it's a trust thing. Like we're promoting people into senior leadership roles, they have to be trusted. But we probably need to open up transparency a bit to give everybody the confidence that actually a diverse pool of candidates is always considered, because you often don't see that. It's not that it's not happening, but there's no doubt there are far few women at leadership levels. And to me, that's the great sort of unanswered challenge at the moment, and there's a lot of effort going into it from a lot of organisations, but we still have work to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say that at an industry level, it's so important, the quotas, events like this, but also to consider the day-to-day impact. So the impact a person has on culture, how safe people, how much trust there is in a team. Definitely don't underestimate that, and that's very important. And so I think initiatives to foster that kind of training and just understanding how important those things are, I think that's really key.
Okay, great.